Hey, I'm Charlie Thompson, and this is the pre-lab video for the Köppen Climate Classification Lab. So, physical geography. What's the point of physical geography? I've said this before, but I think the point of physical geography is understanding why a place has the characteristics it does. And with reference to climates, part of that's climate. Like different places have different climates. Some places are hot, some places are cold, some places have the same temperature all year, some places have huge ranges between really hot summers and bitterly cold winters. Some places are wet all year round, some places are dry all year round, some places are wet and dry in the same year. Some have huge ranges with, a long drought period and then 3 to 6 months of intense rain. So there's a really huge range of climates on Earth. And the climate classification chapter is a really important one because it really ties together pretty much everything that we've been talking about all semester, at least in lecture class. Everything we've talked about. Latitude, which is creating patterns of temperature, both average temperatures and temperature ranges. We've seen continentality, the effect of continentality. Places that are inland have bigger temperature ranges than places that are by the coast. Altitude, it's cool to be high. So, Vladimir Köppen. Let's talk a bit about Vladimir Köppen. He classified climates beginning in the 1800s and was one of the first people to start classifying climates, and he did it in a really obvious kind of way. He was a botanist, a biologist, and so he was looking at plant communities. And the factors that govern plant communities are temperature and rainfall, precip. So Vladimir Köppen classified different temperatures first based on temperature and plants, and then got into more nitty-gritty details with rainfall. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to classify climates using the Köppen classification system. What makes climates? How did Köppen classify? You are going to use the flowchart. There's a flowchart. There's a flowchart. It's all printed out for you. You don't have to remember anything except where did I put my flowchart. In other labs, students comment, oh, there's so much to remember, all these new terms. There's fewer terms. There's a whole lot you're going to have to do, but all you got to do is follow the directions and you'll be fine. So this is another great example of it's not hard. It's just brand new, and I'll do my very best to explain it in a gentle manner. So we're going to classify climates based on temperature and then rainfall. So Vladimir Petrovich Köppen was the guy that did this. He looked at temperature, he looked at precip, and in his system of classifying climates, he figured out these combinations of 2 and 3 letters to identify a particular climate. The first letter tells you the general temperature of that climate. The second letter tells you about the timing of the rainfall. Is it wet all year? Is it rainy in the summertime? Is it rainy in the wintertime? And the third letter tells you a little bit more about the temperature. So the first letter tells you general temperature information. The second letter might tell you it's got an unusually warm summer, or a cool summer, or a wicked cold winter. So the third letter, for the climates that have 3 letters, the third letter is going to tell you more about the temperature. So 2 climate types, the A climates, A, tropical, and the E, polar climates, they only have 2 letters because they're mostly the same temperature all year, so we don't need a third letter to tell us anything about the temperature. If you're a tropical climate, by definition, every month is hot, and if you're a polar climate, by definition, every month is cold. Specifically, tropical climates, by definition, in fact, this is the first thing you're going to look at when classifying climates, and I'll go over, there's another entire longer video about how to actually go through step by step and use the flowchart, use the Köppen system. But the first thing you ask, is it a tropical climate? And the defining characteristic, the first thing you look at it is every month over 18 Celsius, which is 64.4 degrees, about 65 degrees. So if every month is hot, it's a tropical climate. If every month is colder than 10 degrees Celsius, it's a polar climate. So if it's a tropical climate, every month is hot. If it's a polar climate, every month is cold. So we don't need a third letter. This is Vladimir Köppen's 1884 temperature zone map. This was one of his early works, and you can, even on this map, you can see the effect of latitude going from the equator to the poles, going from hot to cold, interrupted by places where it's cold because it's high. For example, the Tibetan Plateau, the Ethiopian highlands, the Andes, the Mexican Cordillera, the Rockies, the Sierra Nevada, the European Alps, for example. So he started off looking at temperature and then got into using precipitation information, precip data, to help classify climates. So looking at the factors that cause climate, average temperatures, this is just showing average temperatures: hot by the equator, hot in the tropics, hot in the subtropics, and then getting cooler and cooler and cooler as you get away from the equator. Yeah, you can see latitude very clearly across North America, interrupted by the Rockies, the Sierra Nevada. Same thing, the Tibetan Plateau, Ethiopian highlands. In Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, the center of the mountain, the center of the island, there's a mountain range that runs down the middle of the island. So it's hot by the equator, and it's cold at high latitude, and it's cold at high elevation. So average temperature range is predominantly latitude, except it's also modified by continentality. So as you go inland, the temperature range gets larger and larger and larger. So right by the equator, very small temperature range. If you're an island, you'd have a tropical island would have the smallest temperature range that we would find. Siberia has the highest temperature range because it's got a combination of high latitude. Like here is the Arctic Circle. Yeah, I'm trying to put these on all the maps now involving climate so that you can always spot the equator, the Tropic of Cancer, the Tropic of Capricorn, and in this case I've included the Arctic and Antarctic circles. So above here you're getting 24 hours of darkness and 24 hours of light. So high latitude and well inland, the prevailing winds are the westerlies. So by the time the wind gets way inland, all the rain that's going to fall has hit the mountains in Scandinavia, has hit the Ural Mountains, so it's dry, and there's a huge temperature range. So that's temperature range. Annual precip, same effect. If you're under the ITCZ in the tropics, it's going to be wet all year. If you're under the subtropical high, it's going to be dry all year. So it goes from 12 months of rain to 6 months of rain to no rain to rain in the wintertime under the polar front in the mid-latitudes. It's going to be rainy again. And then as you get farther north, it's just so cold that there isn't enough energy to keep enough water vapor present to have it be wet. So it goes hot and wet, hot and dry, cool and wet, and then finally cold and dry in these polar deserts. So that's rainfall. And the two of those together, well, here's North America, same effect, high places, orographic lifting when it hits the mountains coming in. As the storms come in off the Pacific and hit the mountains, they leave the rain there, so it's drier inland. East Coast has that warm current, so they get lots of rain year-round on the East Coast. West Coast has a cold current, so we're dry in the summer. So this is confusing. You're not going to see this again this chapter. These are the Holridge life zones. And somebody realized that those factors that I was just talking about, going from hot to cold, and then from hot and wet to hot and dry, to cool and wet to cold and dry. So this is the Holridge life zone concept. Let me go to the next slide because that'll help. Hey, across, going left to right, you're going from dry with deserts to rainforests. So going from left to right, going from dry to wet. Okay, these are the Holridge life zones, named after a scientist named Holridge. And let me get to the next slide because I think it'll help make everything make more sense. So going across from left to right, we're going from dry with deserts over here to rainforests over here. So going from dry to wet across left to right. So left to right, wet and dry, rainforest, rainforest, rainforest over here, desert, desert, desert over here. So we've got wet to dry, and then the other, this is precip, the next feature is going to be temperature. So we're going from hot to cold, going from tropical rainforest to temperate rainforest. So it's pretty much the range of situations you're going to find on Earth, right? Everything from super hot, super wet, to super hot, super dry, to super cold and dry. So these are biomes, which are groups of plants and animals. Biomes are plants and animals. So the names of some of the climates and the biomes are going to merge together. Like we'll keep seeing tropical rainforest. You'll see that a lot. So this is that same going from cold to hot and going from dry to wet. So hot and wet, tropical rainforest, hot and dry, subtropical desert. In between the mid-latitudes where we live, in Seattle, north of there, you could have temperate rainforest. We are in a woodland, shrubland kind of situation. If we were colder, like by Lake Tahoe, boreal forest with pine trees. And then where it's cold, 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 cold and dry, you're going to get tundra, which is little tiny shrubby plants, no trees. You can have moss, but no trees. So cold to hot and dry to wet. So these are the biomes on Earth. They're related to the life zones. Here's a map of biomes, and I included it because it looks really similar to the map of climates that we're going to look at, with rainforest and then intermediate savanna and getting drier going into desert, and then boreal communities, pine forests across the high latitude regions. So let's take a look. This is Köppen's climate classification system. He figured out 5 climates: tropical, in the tropics, dry, the arid climates, the deserts where the precip is less than half of the water you'd need, and steppes, which is like around Fresno, where you're not getting enough water, but it's not dry enough to be a desert. And then mesothermal, meso means middle, these are middle temperature. Microthermal, only in the northern hemisphere. I'll just keep repeating this. Only in the northern hemisphere because you need extreme continentality to get winters below freezing. Mesothermal, the winters are above freezing. Microthermal, freezing winters. That's pretty much the difference. And then as you keep moving north, you end up with the polar climates. There's also some polar climates, like the Tibetan Plateau classifies as a polar climate. Some parts of the Andes and the Rockies and the Sierras classify as polar climates. Those really aren't polar climates, but because of their temperature range, their temperature characteristics, they get classified as a polar climate. Those really should properly be identified as highland climates because it classifies as polar, but it's not in the poles, and it's only cold because it's high, so it's a highland climate. But there's no way really to classify those, so we're just going to leave it and say, fine, if it classifies as a polar climate, it's a polar climate. So I wanted to include this one, and gosh, I hope this is as dramatic in my head as it should be, but these are the climate zones. And I think one of the great things about the Köppen system is that it looks like it. So I'm going to go to satellite imagery and go back and forth. Like the dry climates, yeah, those are like spot on. Could not be better. Southern Africa, the Sahara, Saudi Arabia, into Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, the Tibetan Plateau, the Gobi Desert, the Taklamakan Desert, the deserts of Australia, the Atacama Desert, our own Southwest. So if I go back for just a sec, I think the dry climates are super obvious. The polar climates aren't really as obvious. The dividing line here is winters above freezing, winters below freezing, winters above freezing, winters below freezing. But I think the Köppen climate classification does a really good job of explaining why these climates are where they are. It does a good job of explaining why Earth looks the way it does. Oh, that's a dry climate. That's a tropical rainforest. In between the super green and the super brown, this is a savanna climate where they're getting 6 months of rain, or 0 to 6 months of rain. 12 months of rain? Then there's some monsoonal climates in here someplace where they're getting 6 to 12 months of rain. Fewer than 6 months of rain, you're savanna, and then eventually into desert. So, as I said, Köppen has these 5 climates. There's the tropical, the dry, the mesothermal, the microthermal, and the polar climates. Here's all of the climates using a different color scheme. So we've got tropical, tropical, and then we've got steppe and desert, and then steppe, and then Mediterranean, which is a mesothermal. So actually this is tropical. This green is tropical. The yellow and the red are arid or dry or desert. Well, actually steppe, and then the red is desert. And then we get more steppe. And then the brown is mesothermal. That's Mediterranean, 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 and Mediterranean, the 5 places on Earth where there's Mediterranean climates. And then we have humid subtropical on the east coast in the mid-latitudes. There's a humid subtropical climate. And then as you go north, you get a humid continental climate. And the difference between the subtropical and the continental is the continental has freezing winters. You don't need to memorize that. Don't stress as I'm saying these things. I'm just trying to give you a brief overview, hoping that some of it will stick and help you through this lab. So Köppen climates, let's take a look at the tropical climates. So now I'm only showing you the tropical climates. You can see they're pretty much in the tropics. Tropical climates, the defining characteristic every month warmer than 18 Celsius. And this is a climograph. We haven't talked about climographs. We haven't used climographs, and I love them. They tell you the rainfall, the bar graph, and the temperature month by month over a year. So climographs show the temperature and precip for a weather station. The temperature is shown with a line graph, and the precip is shown with a bar graph. So we've got the red line graph showing temperature, and then we've got the blue bar graph showing precip. So this is a tropical location. You can see every month is above, well, 18 would be in here, right? So every month is in fact warmer than whatever that is, 23 degrees, 25 degrees. Actually, yeah, every month is warmer than 25 degrees. So, and you can see, yeah, this is the cool thing about a climograph is you can see immediately the temperature and rainfall characteristics. It looks like the summertime is super rainy and the wintertime is really dry, which is the way every climate but the Mediterranean climate is. There's a weird idea for you. Mediterranean climates are pretty much the only climates that have a summer dry season. Everybody else, if it's summertime, the sun is overhead, it's the rainy season. But we live in a Mediterranean climate, so we don't have that. But you can also tell if it's in the northern or southern hemisphere. You can tell how long the drought period is, all that good stuff. So this is a tropical climate defined by temperature. And then the next thing we would wonder about is the precip distribution. Is it rainy? Is it summer dry? Is it winter dry? Is it monsoon? But we'll use the flowchart for that. I just wanted to show you some climates and some climographs. Another tropical climate, you can see, in fact, this looks like it's in the southern hemisphere because January is warmer than July. So one of the questions when we get into next week, when we get into the dry climates, one of the first questions you have to ask yourself is it in the northern or the southern hemisphere? Or actually, is the rainy season in the summer or is the rainy season in the winter? And to figure out when the summer is, you need to know is it northern or southern hemisphere, but the climographs make that really easy. You just look and go, oh, well, if it's cool in July and hot in January and February, you're in the southern hemisphere. Dry climates. So this space was all filled with tropical climates. Tropical climates on either side bounding the tropical climates are the dry climates. So the dry climates have permanent moisture deficits. Precip is less than potet. The mesothermal climates have a summertime and a wintertime. They have a summertime, they have a bunch of months warmer than 10 Celsius, which you need for good tree growth. And they have a definite winter time, but the winter's warmer than freezing. So we've got East Coast, humid subtropical. We've got on the West Coast, we've got Mediterranean, and then marine West Coast. Marine West Coast. Most of your northern Europe is a marine West Coast climate, where they are so much farther north that they're out of the influence of the subtropical high, and they're just cruising along, getting hit by the polar front. So they get rain year round. Rain year round. At the lower elevations in the subtropics and the mid-latitudes, the subtropical high parks right here and blocks the storms in the summer. Same thing in Europe. The Azores high would be parked right here, rotating clockwise, and so the storms end up in northern Europe, away from the Mediterranean climates. So Mediterranean climates have 3 months with a temperature over 10 Celsius, and the winter is also warmer than 0 degrees. They have a summer and a mild winter. So here we've got some sort of sea climate. You can see the temperature not every month is over 18. In fact, the coldest month looks like it's 7 degrees or so. This is a northern hemisphere station because the summertime, or rather June, July are the hot months. Well, July, August are the hottest months here, but there's a summer drought. And we'll figure out in the other video how to determine summer dry, winter dry, all that stuff. But looking at the climograph, you go, oh yeah, look at that. It's got to be a Mediterranean climate because it's summer dry and there's a warm summer, warm, dry summer. It's got to be Mediterranean. The microthermal climates, the snowy forest climates, it's one of the other names for them, very similar to the mesothermal, except the winters are freezing now. So you're higher, you're at higher latitude, you're out of the mid-latitudes, you're getting up into the subarctic now. So longer nights in the winter, less energy in the summer, colder temperatures year-round, but because of their high latitude and the extreme continentality at this latitude, they have really warm summers. So they have warm summers and wicked freezing winters, the D-microthermal climates. Okay, microthermal climates. 3 months hotter than 10 Celsius. So they've got 3 months of summertime, and the winter is less than 0. The winter is below freezing. The winters are below freezing. That's one of the reasons that the microthermal climates are sometimes called snowy forest climates. They have a summertime and a freezing wintertime. So here is a station that is a D climate, and again, I will give you climographs and also data tables, but I was going to say, just looking at this, if any of the winter months are below 0 and you've got 3 months over 10 Celsius, it's a D climate. It's a snowy forest climate. And this appears to be humid because they're getting over 6 centimeters rain every month. And it's in the northern hemisphere. Northern hemisphere. So another station, another D climate. Oh, extra super cold. Colder than -40 in the wintertime. In the summertime, looks like it's getting up to like 15, which is 60 degrees or so. So it's getting up to 60 degrees in the summer and -40 in the winter. And it's dry, 4 centimeters. That's one of the things I should have mentioned before, but I forgot, that the scales keep changing. The scales are unique to each one. So this one's going from -60 to 20 and from 0 up to 5 centimeters. If I go to the previous one, you can see it's -10 to 30 and 0 to 10 centimeters. And if I back way up, yeah, this is going from 0 to 60 centimeters and 0 to 30 Celsius. So something to keep in mind, that the stations, each of these climographs has a scale for that particular station. And then finally, the polar climates, they're just cold all year round. These are properly highland climates. We're going to call them polar climates. Don't worry about it. The polar climates, high latitudes, polar regions, cold year round, no true summer. Every month, colder than 10 Celsius. If every month is colder than 10 Celsius, you need not look any farther. It's a polar climate. And here's a polar climate station. So in fact, for this, every month is below freezing. and not a whole lot of rain. I should have also mentioned 2.5 centimeters are an inch of rain. So 2.5 centimeters of rain are an inch of rain. So yeah, very, very dry. Oh, and Southern Hemisphere, because the hot months are December and January. I mean, it's not even cracking freezing, but it's better than negative 25. So a Southern Hemisphere location. Okay, Köppen system uses 2 or 3 letters. The first indicates the general temperature. The second tells about the timing of the rainfall. The third tells more about the temperature during the year. Tropical and polar climates don't have seasons, so they don't get a third letter. And with the Köppen climates, you have to check them in a special order. I have written the flowchart, the cheat sheet for this chapter in the correct order. So all you got to do is check them. Is it a polar climate? Is every month colder than 10 Celsius? If yes, then you figure out what kind of polar climate. If not, you go, nope, it's not a polar climate. Is it a dry climate? This week, none of the climates are dry. You don't need to do anything to determine if they're dry. They're not. So you can just skip right over the dry climates. Next week, I'll give you more information on how to classify the dry climates. But for this week, you're getting enough with just the Köppen system itself. Tropical is every month over 18. Do you have summer? 3 months over 10 Celsius and the winter is warmer than freezing? Or do you have a microthermal? Yeah, if you end up here, hopefully you've done everything right, because it should class out as microthermal. If you have 3 months over 10 Celsius and the coldest month is below freezing, it's a microthermal climate. Then you got to figure out what kind of microthermal. If not, you've made a mistake. Go back to polar, see if it's a polar, run through the whole thing again. So we've got a climate. It looks pretty rainy. I mean, the scale goes up to 30 centimeters. So that's like, 10 inches. They're getting at least 20 inches of rain a year. And it looks like every month is warm. So it's probably some sort of polar climate. I'm sorry, tropical. It's not polar. Some sort of tropical climate. So here's the flow chart. It's on the sheet. It's a handout. Well, it's not a handout because we're not in class, or if we were in class, it'd be a handout. It's a Google Doc. So first thing, check, is it an E climate? If it's an E climate, yes, then you go to the section on polar climates to figure out which kind. If it's not, then you go to dry. Determine, is it a dry climate? For this week, no, it is not a B climate. Go to check if it's a tropical climate. So the example that we're just doing, right off the get-go, I can say, no, it is not a polar climate. No month is colder than 10 Celsius. It is not a dry climate. Next up, tropical. Are all months warmer than 18? Yes. So yes, it's some sort of a climate. If the answer was no, then we would look at the temperature criteria to see, is the hottest month, are there 3 months over 10? And the coldest month is warmer than freezing? If yes, then it's a C climate. And then you go to the whole section on C climates to figure out what it is. If it wasn't a C climate at this point, it can only be a D climate, or you've made a mistake. So you got to check, are there 3 months over 10 Celsius? The coldest month below freezing? If so, it's a D climate. Go to the D climates to fully classify it. If it's not a D climate, you've done something wrong. Start over with the polar climates. But in this case, every month is over 18 degrees, so it's some sort of tropical climate. And then we would go to the section on tropical climates. Second letter, and you have to check them in this order, F, M, S, W. So F, in the other video I explained, these are from German. So if you speak German, this might be easier for you. Feucht, it's wet. M, monsoon. S, summer dry. W, winter dry. So for the tropical climates, the first one tells us the temperature. Every month is over 18. And then we got to look and see all months. Does everybody get 6 centimeters every month? Yes, everybody, it would appear, is getting more than 6 centimeters. I'm just going to do this quick and dirty. There's a data table attached. You'll use the data table to determine it. But if all months get 6 centimeters of rain, then it's a AF climate because it's wet AF. Okay, that's it for the the Köppen climate classification intro video for Lab 10 on the Köppen climate classification system. I hope you enjoy it. If you have any questions, please stop by Zoom. I hope this week is much, much easier than last week.